And now I will call on Tyler Niles to come and join us on the stage here. All right, so Tyler is the silviculture forester with Weyerhaeuser and Grand Prairie, and he also leads Weyerhaeuser's glyphosate alternative program. Is that correct?
That's correct, Brad.
Excellent, and he's going to be talking about glyphosate alternatives here. So with that, take it away, Tyler.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen, Brad. Just give me a thumbs up or something if we can all see it here. Is that coming through, Brad?
No, not yet.
Okay. Hopefully we don't have technical issues here. Oh, hang on one sec. I figured out the issue. There we go. Should come up now there.
Yeah, you don't have it in the presenters. There you go. Perfect.
Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, we're good to go. Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tyler Niles, and as Brad mentioned, I'm the silviculture forester for Weyerhaeuser Grand Prairie. First and foremost, yeah, I'd just like to thank Brad and Andy for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to run you through some stories and some learnings from our glyphosate alternative program. And I've titled it a survival guide for obvious reasons. So I just wanted to first start off, probably about a year ago, I was like many of you. I was envisioning a world without glyphosate. I had just received news from Weyerhaeuser that we were going to be suspending glyphosate across all of our operations. So obviously I thought, oh, this is going to be doom and gloom. I think I even went through the 7 stages of grief. You know, I stopped at anger and bargaining there for a moment, but didn't get anywhere with that. So I quickly accepted it, and you know, I was going to jump in right away. We wanted to salvage our 2020 season and find some solutions. So I'm here to tell you today, it's not all doom and gloom. There are options. I think if we work together, we keep an open mind, you know, we can find other alternatives. So step 1 for us was really understanding our competition. And I wanted to put this picture up here because this is becoming more of a common scene on our FMA, and really poses 2 questions. What do you do when you come across a site like this and you don't have glyphosate? You know, what are your options? And 2, how do we stop our blocks maybe from getting to this level in the first place? So, you know, the first thing, kind of going back, just looking at our historical strategy, you know, we would solve this problem with glyphosate, no issues there. Historically, we would spray about 5,000 to 6,000 hectares of aerial glyphosate every year. We had a fairly small site prep program, only doing about 750 hectares, and that would mostly be on our poorer sites, not for competition control. And we'd focus on year 1 planting. This strategy was very successful, and you know, hence kind of glyphosate became that big hammer. All competition started to look the same, and maybe at times we were overspraying or treating areas that maybe we could have got away with some site prep or some other options. So hence the cartoon there. So the next step was to you know, really look at our prescription process, because once a block gets planted, without glyphosate, we lose a lot of our tools to control competition. So we're very fortunate. We live in a world where we have an immense amount of data at our fingertips. So we really started to dive into ecosite-derived prescriptions. And you know, once we kind of wrapped our heads around, you know, an opening may have 2 or 3 different prescriptions or treatments, and we shifted our mindset more towards this intensive level of silviculture, things really started to make sense for us. So we took all that ecosite data, we combined it with some of our past surveys, some of our successes, our failures, even gathering information from our harvesting group. And we wanted to roll that up, for an FMA level view, and really just kind of classify our FMA into different silviculture intensities. This was important for two reasons. One, our harvesting has shifted over the last decade, so we're no longer in this big mountain pine beetle cut. We're transitioning into more mixed wood, rich stands. So what we were doing, 10 years ago in terms of competition control may not work now. So we just wanted to make sure we were looking with the freshest set of eyes at our FMA. And two, our competition control program, historically was 3 weeks long. We could do our whole FMA with an aerial glyphosate treatment. And now we're looking at 9 months and half a dozen contractors using 3 or 4 different techniques. So we needed a way to classify our FMA, focus our efforts, maybe identify areas where we could take a bit more risk. So I put planning down here 3 times. I mean, that's what it all comes down to now, is planning, and more planning. So step 2, we needed to look at our options. We knew there wasn't going to be a direct replacement for glyphosate, and we knew that we're probably going to have to recreate glyphosate and that effect through, various different treatments. So we wanted to put everything on the table, explore all options, and really just jump into trialing different combinations and see what would work for us going into the future. This is probably just more of a joke for me, but the whole process reminded me of one of those choose your own adventure books. Go to page 86 and see how the sheep grazing turns out. My manager is probably just shaking his head right now, but I can promise you there is no scary endings to any of these options, just good learnings. So sheep grazing, I promise you I've heard all of the jokes at this point, so I'm glad everybody is muted right now. This was the first treatment we were looking at, and we were exploring this option even before we decided to suspend the use of glyphosate, particularly in our high use areas on our FMA around First Nations traditional land use areas. So in 2020, we grazed about 200 hectares using 950 sheep from two different flocks in BC and Alberta. And overall, based on just our initial findings and some of the data we gathered from last season, this seems like a good option as a small niche treatment. We didn't see a lot of seedling damage, which was one of our main concerns. And one of the biggest learnings is there's probably a million different variables that's going to impact the program. So everything from season of grazing, the moisture level, the type of vegetation, this is all going to impact your program. So being flexible, adaptable, changing your plans, all part of a good sheep grazing program. And then there's obviously lots of challenges still. So we need more research, obviously. This being such a new treatment in Alberta, there's capacity issues with contractors and sheep. Things like working with other land users. So you can imagine an oil and gas truck getting stuck behind this flock and just what's going through that person's mind. So, working with people, again, going back to really good planning, all key for this type of project. So just a kind of a quick before and after shot of one of our blocks. You can see that the sheep really do knock down the vegetation. I put a couple of arrows here just showing some seedlings here, and the goal is hopefully we get a season or a season and a half where these seedlings can take advantage of that light and extra resources and just try and shoot up a little bit higher. But the real insight will be when we go back this year and review these blocks and see what the green up is like post grazing. So the next area we really wanted to explore was growing our mechanical site preparation program. And we're not really reinventing any wheels here. We just had two basic strategies. One is where we can use some sort of mounding prep to control competition in grass. And two, we just wanted to improve the growth and performance of our seedlings to try and just kind of combat some of that competition and just give them a bit of a head start. You know, when you're growing your site prep program by 300 or 400%, does pose some challenges. So contractor and equipment shortages are always an issue. You need to leave a ton more access open, so there's issues with that, like erosion and increased reclamation costs. And then most importantly, if you put the wrong machine in the wrong block, you can actually make things worse and maybe even promote grass. So again, it's all tied back to your prescription process and just making sure you have a really good plan up front when you do your prescriptions. So the first herbicide we wanted to explore in 2020 was triclopyr. So what I did is I basically took my planned glyphosate program for 2020, which was about 6,000 hectares, and that was the area of land and the data I was going to work with to try and build my triclopyr program. Because of pine susceptibility to triclopyr, I knew immediately that we would lose about half that area because half our FMA is roughly managed for a pine objective. So that left us with about 3,000 hectares for the program. You know, and then triclopyr is only effective on broadleaf vegetation. So I went through all of our past competition flight data and I removed anything where I had flagged, you know, heavy grass competition because there was no point in spraying those blocks. That netted us down to about 1,850 hectares. I then wanted to just be, you know, very certain that there was no pine ingress, and I wanted to have a better understanding of the actual levels of grass in those blocks. So we grid surveyed all 1,850 hectares, and it turns out there was a lot of pine coming back in our spruce blocks and more grass than we thought. So we netted the program down again to about 900 hectares. And our fear with, you know, kind of a low to moderate level of grass is if we remove that broadleaf competing layer, are we just going to create basically a field of grass? Will that grass come back and just take advantage of that open space? That was something we were very aware of, very concerned about, so we were being quite cautious. I then removed our high-risk blocks, you know, anything with lots of water or retention patches, and netted it down again to about 500 hectares. And this was the program that I gave to our contractor, you know, at the start of the season that we were going to try and treat. At the end of the season, when everything was sprayed, we ended up with about 260 hectares. Again, we netted down based on some water that we found and some unsuitable areas found during our recce flights. So obviously there's a lot of gray area on this graph that's not suitable for treatment. I think the biggest problem was kind of the old square peg and a round hole analogy. We were trying to force triclopyr into a glyphosate situation, trying to treat our blocks that were 2 to 4 years old, you know, really focusing on broadleaf competition, not so much decid, and it just doesn't work. I mean, triclopyr is really designed for those older cut blocks to manage deciduous, to keep your conifer objectives. So, I mean, knowing that, you know, this herbicide, I think will be a really good long-term tool for us, managing conifer on our land base. Imazapyr, this is the second herbicide we wanted to explore. So in 2020, we did approximately 500 hectares. The great thing about Imazapyr, so in I think late 2019, 2020, the label changed to allow for a broadcast treatment. So this opened up a whole bunch of opportunities for us, not only to manage our mixed wood stands, utilizing sort of the traditional strip or patch treatment, but now allowed us to broadcast spray and manage our pure conifer conifer openings. So, you know, imazapyr is looking like a really great option for us going forward, and will be most likely to kind of replace glyphosate. There's still lots of challenges though. Imazapyr is quite expensive. You need large water buffers compared to glyphosate. You really want to be aware of your slopes and where you're applying the imazapyr. And probably the biggest issue is right now, imazapyr is a backpack only application. You know, anybody who manages a backpack program knows it's really hard to scale those programs. You're really getting limited data. It's not super precise. So just, to me, there's got to be a better way going forward. So, you know, so where are we going from here? Well, there's this phrase I've been throwing around a lot in the office, and you know, I've talked with Mila about this, but this idea of precision herbicide, or more generally, the precision silviculture. So one of the ideas we're working on this year and we're currently building is a forwarder type sprayer that can replace that that backpack treatment, or at least reduce that program size. So you know, utilizing basically aerial type technology, and we can increase our production, and we can get much better data, which I think is key for the industry moving forward. Is you know, gone are the days of kind of these large broadcast programs. I mean, we need to be putting herbicide precisely where we mean to, and I think units like these are going to become more common in the future. Herbicide trials. So again, this goes back to this this idea of precision herbicide. You know, and we just need continued research and trials of new herbicides. So, you know, one of the things that makes glyphosate great is that it's this broad spectrum, just kind of jack of all trades type of chemical. But I also think that's its downfall. You know, there's other herbicides out there that have a bit more niche of a role. You look at triclopyr, lots of herbicides in the ag world that are much more precise and you know, target vegetation. So I think just as an industry, we need to be looking at some of these other options and just getting some other tools in our toolbox going forward. Milo said it best. I mean, you know, a hammer is a great tool, but sometimes you need a screwdriver. So that's a great analogy for glyphosate. I mean, I think there's always going to be a need for it, and it's going to kind of be a cornerstone of our silviculture program. But you know, a few other tools where we can you know, have some refined programs, I think is needed. And then kind of lastly, I'm just going to get up on my soapbox here for the last couple of minutes, you know, and just say, you know, when Weyerhaeuser made the decision to suspend the use of glyphosate, and we were rolling out these other programs, I heard all kinds of things from various stakeholders and folks around the province that, you know, Weyerhaeuser finally realized, you know, how bad glyphosate is and blah, blah, blah. You know, even though we're not using it, you know, I'm here to say we still got to be supporting the science and just keeping that momentum going. I think as an industry, we've come a really long way of educating the public, and we can't slip on that. So continued industry support and collaboration, I think, is key. You know, conferences like this and getting like-minded folks together, I mean, it's just so important moving forward, and I just can't emphasize that enough. So yeah, I guess with that being said, that's my presentation. I jammed a lot of information into it, so I left a bit of time, you know, for questions, and I'll certainly be around this morning to answer any other questions. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Tyler. There's a question here about the sprayer. Is that done for site prep prior to planting, or can it sneak through rows of trees and not damage the crop trees?
Yeah, great question. So it is only built right now for an imazapyr treatment. So it'd be a site prep treatment prior to planting. But I mean, the technology maybe could be designed to use for other herbicides, but for our situation, it's for imazapyr.
Okay, and this is a little bit about Weyerhaeuser's decision not to use glyphosate. So can you give us a little bit of the rationale for deciding not to use glyphosate, but then still allowing other herbicides? What was the thinking there? If you're capable of speaking to that or willing to speak to that, maybe.
I will try not to put my head in a noose here. I mean, this was a corporate decision. You know, Weyerhaeuser has operations throughout North America, so you know, I think it's driven just by public pressure, and you know, we see all of the herbicides equal. I mean, we have 3 approved, safe, effective herbicides in Alberta. You know, this was a decision, you know, just driven by our corporate office, and not driven by our Alberta operations in any way.
Okay, and just maybe one final question here, but can you comment on the relative cost of these different treatments, and maybe even if just you know, relative to glyphosate or something like that? As to, are we dealing with way more expensive, or what's the ratio there, perhaps?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, in general, all of these treatments are quite a bit more expensive. So your triclopyrs and imazapyr, just the chemicals alone are probably 10 times more expensive than glyphosate. You know, but I think when you look at all your programs combined, so we used to spray, like I said, you know, 5,000 to 6,000 hectares. You know, how much of that, you know, were we overspraying? And I think when you combine all the programs together, we're not seeing a huge silviculture cost increase. So it's a balanced approach. You know, things like sheep grazing are obviously very expensive at this point. You know, you're probably looking at $500 to $1,000 a hectare, but you're not doing these on landscape level projects. So again, it comes down to this intensive level of silviculture, and we're seeing the cost sort of balance out over the long term. So.
Excellent. And I think we do have time for one more question here. So we're not able to, this generated a lot of great questions here. We're not able to get to all of them, but just a reminder that Tyler will be at one of the tables this morning to follow up any other questions that you do have. I'll also mention that Tyler isn't able to join us this afternoon. So if you do want to talk with them, you know, try and get to his table this morning. I have a feeling it might be a very popular one for discussion. But one last question here about public perceptions. Have you noticed differences in public perception between different herbicides? Like, is there a difference in public perception between glyphosate versus triclopyr or imazapyr or other herbicides?
Yeah, so we've done, I guess, kind of 2 rounds of public consultations. We obviously had our programs last year that we consulted on, and then we're starting our consultation this year. And it's been very well received. So, you know, the cornerstone of our consultation is this idea of precision herbicide now. And, you know, First Nations groups, our other public stakeholders are really getting behind this idea. And we're seeing just a lot of positivity with the use of triclopyr and imazapyr. And you know, we're not spraying the 5,000 to 6,000 hectares anymore. And I think just that the public is seeing that, and just those efforts that we're trying are going a really long way. So I think that's my biggest sort of takeaway is, you know, we're still very upfront that, you know, this is a suspension of the use of glyphosate. It could come back, but we're trying other options for the public. So that's helped us immensely.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Tyler.